The Finnish Army and Civil Guard were stuck with the M91 Mosin rifle by default after independence and their civil war. The Mosin was what they possessed the most of due to being a duchy of Russia and the heavy Russian military presence in the country prior to the Russian Revolution and Finnish independence. Not many countries outside of Russia would desire the Mosin post-World War I, so Finland was able to obtain the lion's share of Mosins captured during the Great War through purchase and bartering using their stock of Mausers and Arasakas, all of which I covered in the first video of this series. The Army and Civil Guard would start to diverge in how they would repair shot out and poorly stored corroded barrels due to different levels of funding, something I covered in the second video. By the mid-1920s, the Finnish Defense Forces saw the necessity to update the M91 from an old world long rifle into something more modern. This video covers the Army's attempt, the M27. As with all the videos in this series, my almost exclusive source for this is Matt D'Orazio's book, Finnish Mosin Nagant 3-Line Rifle to Ukko-Pekka. A great source to dispel FUD lore, some of which I may have been guilty of spreading myself. Basically, Finland's John Moses Browning, Emil Lahti, was tasked with turning the turd that was the Mosin into a diamond. When the Ordnance Department of the Ministry of Defense first proposed a new infantry rifle in early 1927, they desired to replace the M91 with a short rifle derived from the Kar 98A that could fire a 7.62 by 54mm rimmed round. This would prove to be too expensive thanks to meager funds, so it was decided to shorten and modernize the M91. The biggest change would be a shorter, heavier barrel, which would reduce the overall length of the rifle by 4.75 inches. A vast majority of these barrels would be produced by Tikkokoski from 1927 to 1940, with a couple small runs be produced at State Factory VKT from 1932, also in 34 and 35. A hinged nose cap would be added to allow removal of the handguard without complete removal of the nose cap. To save money, M91 stocks and handguards would be shortened and channeled to accommodate these changes. A Carcano-style knife bayonet would replace the old spike bayonet. The combination of all these would cause weakness and splitting of the handguard that would need to be remedied, which I'll go over in a bit. Another problem-inducing change would be to add a wing bolt connector to tighten bolt lockup inside the receiver. This would also require grooves to be milled into the rear of the receiver to allow the bolt connector to fully insert into the receiver. This would work in conjunction with the new two-stage trigger design that replaced the heavy single-stage trigger of the M91. A rear 360-degree transverse swing swivel would be added with the old sling slot filled with wood. The rear Konovalov sight would be reused and modified. The old Russian Arshin markings would be fully ground or milled away, with new markings measuring in meters replacing them. A 200-meter step would be added at the rear of the sight leaf, and it would be ground away to create a flat surface. A raised blade would replace the front sight. The big improvement here would be the sight guards added, which protected the sight and aided target acquisition. These would be developed by Finland's John Moses Browning, Emil Lahti. These would give the rifle the nickname, and I'm going to put that word across the screen, I'm not going to pronounce it, but it basically means vertical ears or spits, named after a dog breed with upright pointy ears. Here's where I need to walk back FUD lore that I'm guilty of passing in videos made prior to the release of D'Orazio's book. I gave Lahti credit for the M27 redesign and even said that he was tasked with turning the turd that was the Mosin into a diamond. From the book, and my personal conversations with the author, Lahti really only had his hands on the design on the front sight, one of the more successful aspects of the rifle, due to him being busy with many other projects. Also, you really can't call the M27 a diamond, as it was riddled with problems, and you can tell D'Orazio really thinks of this model as the red-headed stepchild in the realm of Finn Mosins, as problems that need to be remedied. When it comes to the M27, 1934 is the year where we see a divide. There were so many problems with the rifle that production was scaled back until these issues were rectified. 1934 would be the last year of large-scale manufacture of the M27, although it would be produced in relatively small numbers through 1940. Modifications to the existing rifles in service to fix these problems would take precedence. One problem that went away by simply eliminating the upgrade was the wing bolt connector. The bolt connector and grooves allowed dirt in and created jamming problems without creating any advantages. These modifications also hurt standardization, as only receivers with the milled grooves would accept the wing bolt connector. The simple solution was to eliminate the wing bolt connector, and M27 rifles made after this change would lack the grooves cut into the receiver. This was certainly more simple than solving the problems of the weakened stocks. Channeling them for the thicker barrel, the new hinged nose cap, and the new bayonet would cause splitting and damage when fired with the bayonet attached or just actually using the bayonet. The stocks were also initially coated with copal lacquer, which would easily flake off. The latter would soon be replaced with rifle stock oil. When it came to the nose cap, the fix would be to weld a metal reinforcement on each side, what collectors now call popsicle sticks, that helped many of us spot a rifle as an M27 from a distance. The popsicle sticks would prove satisfactory for both existing stocks that hadn't been ruined, as well as for the remedy for the shattered stocks, the splice we see on most Finn Mosins. To preserve functional rear wooden stocks, a new forward section, fitted with a thicker barrel, would be added and attached via a splice in the middle. The strength of the splice stock proved successful enough that this method became standard practice on M2830 and M39 rifles. This heavier stock and handguard would also necessitate a heavier barrel band. Early barrel bands are too small but can be jammed on the newer stocks, while the newer barrel band would be too loose for the older stocks. Alright, this is the M27. This is the Army's attempt to improve the Mosin. This is a later example. Note the popsicle sticks. It was made in 1940. I have the Tula ammo steel case in here right now. It does have the D on here, so this should be good for 7.62 by 54R. It was initially chambered 7.62 by 53R, so I do have some brass case ammo in case this doesn't work. But let's see how it does with the old steel case Tula right now. Taking a quick look at my M27, mine is a Tikakowski and one of the last 1,000 made, as it was made in 1940, the last year of production. This means it has every update, including the popsicle sticks, the splice stock, a normal bolt with no grooves cut in the receiver. I did have some problems shooting it, as there were a lot of light strikes and chambering issues with the current bolt. I was able to shoot it with the bolt from my P26. I wonder if it had to do with 7.62 by 53R, although it was made well after 1936 and this does have a D mark on the chamber. Perhaps it just doesn't like the Herder steel cased ammo. Speaking of chamberings and ammo, one thing I haven't touched on in this or the previous Finn videos is chambering. When Finland started to run out of old Russian 54R ammo, they needed a domestic produced option. 53R and 54R have slight dimensional differences, with 53R having a slightly smaller diameter bullet, 308 as opposed to 311. In 1936, Finland would adopt the 200 grain D166 bullet, more similar to the Russian round, as to be able to use captured Russian ammo in a potential conflict. All rifles chambered for the new round would be marked with a D. Rifles chambered for the prior round are marked with an F. Both 53R and 54R can be shot out of a 54R chambered rifle, but one must be a little more careful with shooting larger diameter bullets in the rifles chambered exclusively for 53R, as this can cause excessive barrel wear. 53R rifles can also be very picky with steel case 54R rounds. While 120,000 M27 rifles were initially desired, the slowing of production due to problems and the stop order that wasn't completely followed in 1934 kept total production to 68,000. Barrels would be produced at Tika from 1927 to 1940, with small batches of VKT in 32, 34, and 35, and rifles would be assembled at AV1. They'd be given to frontline Army units, with the M91s being pushed to the rear. The M27 would suffer losses via attrition during the Winter War and actually be replaced by its predecessor, the M91, as there were copious M91 parts laying around and M39 production really wasn't spooled up yet. Any rifle that went through an Army depot post-late 1942, which is almost nearly all surviving Finn rifles, will have the SA stamp that replaced the, I'm not going to pronounce that word either, I'm just going to put it across the screen, stamp. In 1951, there were only around 27,000 M27 rifles in storage. These would be used for basic training through the 1960s and deemed obsolete in 1986. Century Arms would import them to the U.S. during the late 80s, early 90s. While the rifle did serve well, it never got over its poor early reputation from the bugs that needed worked out, and it certainly wasn't as good as the Civil Guard's M28 and especially M2830, which will be the subject of the next video in this series. It can be said that these rifles wouldn't have been as good as the Civil Guard were able to learn from the Army's mistakes and growing pains, which if you want to learn more about earlier Finn history and growing pains, click over here. Otherwise, please join the GOA and get $5 off your membership with the link in the description. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a great day.